Hey everyone, gonna be a busy day over here at ELD's Time Vault Games. We've got Wednesday Night Legacy tonight, and I've got a whole lot going on in the store, so I'm just getting to these morning spoilers. I'll probably do another one really late tonight to round out the day here. On Wednesday, we've got Skyclave Apparition kicking things off, a core spirit for 3, which may be playable in spirits, guys. This is a very interesting card. When it enters the battlefield, exile up to 1 target non-land, non-token permanent you don't control with converted mana cost 4 or less. We're talking anything from Jace the Mind Sculptor down to most of the threats that are going to see play in constructed Magic. And when it leaves the battlefield, the exiled card's owner creates a XX blue illusion where X is the converted mana cost of the exiled card. So you get rid of a Jace. If they manage to handle the Skyclave Apparition, then they're going to get a 4/4 in that instance, but they're not getting the Jace back. So, that's a very interesting card. Little surprised it doesn't have flying, but I guess the spirits in this realm are going to be more tethered to the earth. But I think this one's going to be a contender. For Spirits decks, you've already got Cavern of Souls to help out with that double white, and it does answer just about everything, and no actual drawback until the Skyclave Apparition is taken care of, compared to something like a Beast Within, or Generous something from Modern Horizons. We've seen that getting rid of a opposing permanent and giving them a 3/3 Beast is actually potentially fine. All right, Umbra Wizard. Exploring the new design space. So we've got a 5 casting cost 4/3 that whenever you cast an instant sorcery or wizard, he gets flying until end of turn. So very likely a solid card in limited. A 4 power flyer for 5 is fine. If you've got instants and sorceries, of course, other wizards to be able to give it flying. You don't always have to have flying if they don't have a blocker, whatever, but if they do need to get some wings for a turn, you can easily play an instant sorcery or wizard in many cases. And if you need landfall more than a 4/3 body, you can play it as a land coming into play tapped. So really cool design space, being able to take advantage of landfall triggers when they're more useful. And also, you can potentially be returning these creatures to hand and then playing them as lands as well. So just a really interesting design space. It's going to be fun to see how this plays out in Limited. This guy is a 1/3, I believe, core Cleric. And you gain 2 life when it enters the battlefield, so that'll potentially help out with your party, or also come into play tapped and be able to tap for white mana as well. We'll see what the names on these cards are. They're in Korean here, so they could. A literal translation is not a guarantee to be exactly the name of the card, but the text is going to be clear. This one's going to do 4 damage to a creature, and then X damage to that creature's controller, where X is the number of creatures in your party. So for 5 mana, you're going to take out a solid threat and potentially apply some more heat to their face, which in Limited seems like a fair, if expensive, piece of removal, like a potentially really solid card. Into the Royal. Returning. This card was really good in Limited, and I think, if I remember correctly, it was actually played in Constructed as well, just being able to bounce a permanent and draw a card for 4 mana, but being able to do it for 2 mana in a pinch, but, later on, just paying 4 mana. Repulse was a great card the first time it was printed back during Psychotog's reign, and this is very similar to that, just a little bit more versatility, seeing as how you can play it for less mana and not get the card draw in a tight situation. Demon's Disciple at 3 mana, a 3/1. When it enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. This is an interesting take on Fleshbag Marauder and its kin. We've seen 3 mana edict effects tacked onto a creature, and I don't know, being able to take out planeswalkers makes this, I think, a better card versus. There's certainly more situations where it could be devastating if your opponent has just a board of a planeswalker and you've got some tokens and you play this. That's absolutely brutal. So I think this is a cool printing. Typically, Fleshbag Marauder hasn't been like the most exciting card, especially in formats where, your opponent might have tokens lying around as well, and it's not really hitting anything worth talking about. But yeah, this one's pretty interesting. I'm not sure where it will shine, but it's a pretty cool card. It is a Cleric, which helps out with your party. And that's going to be kind of the theme for a lot of these human creatures, is seeing how they can round out your party, get some extra value with your other cards. Grotag Night Runner, very close to Groatog in the name there. Probably my favorite deck of all time in Vintage. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, exile the top card of your library. You can play that card this turn. I mean, that's some value right there, especially in a set that cares about land drops so much. Very often you're going to be hitting a land, about half the time if you're playing 18 lands in a 40-card deck, let's say. And just a really interesting take on the Ophidian strategies that blue has enjoyed. Now red is kind of getting more of that, with Chandra kicking that off in the past. This card continues that theme of exiling the top card and playing it this turn only. So red getting card advantage, but only in the moment, and might not be the best time to be playing the card, but free cards are tough to turn down, and I suspect this one will be very solid and limited. Kazza Royal Chaser, a legendary creature for 2, which is potential for tiny leaders if anybody's still playing that format. Flying and haste, and you can tap it to make the next instant or sorcery you cast this turn cost X less, where X is the number of wizards you control as this ability resolves. Awkward templating there, but it does need to be very precise, as locking in costs can be complicated in Magic. You want to make sure that there's no ambiguity there. And yeah, I mean, I don't have too much to say about this one. Seems like some players are going to enjoy tinkering around with this type of thing. Tapping and untapping it could potentially generate massive amounts of mana, so to speak, for your X spells, which could easily be overlooked. So, I mean, maybe you'll be taking people out with giant earthquakes with this creature in Commander. Sneaking Guide, 2 and tap it. Target creature with power 2 or less can't be blocked this turn. A 1 casting cost, 1/1. Generally not very exciting and limited. It is a Goblin Rogue, and that is about it. I mean, I suppose, this enables... No, I got nothing. I was going to say it kind of enables the champion mechanic, but that's not the one I was looking for. I was thinking about the Earwig Squad Prowl costs. There we go. Goblin and Rogue. But I mean, decks that ran Earwig Squad, this is already a Goblin anyways. I'm reaching on this one, guys. They got to print some cards that are not exciting. Let's be honest. They got to offset the amazing ones. Ashaya, Soul of the Wild, 5 casting costs, and its power and toughness are equal to the number of lands you control. That's going to be, when you're casting this in limited, almost always at least a 5/5 for 5. With an upside here of non-token creatures you control are forest lands in addition to their other types. That is very interesting. So they're going to be able to tap for green if they're a forest, and when they enter the battlefield, they're going to trigger landfall. That would be my understanding of this, without taking a look at the FAQ or anything, making some pretty powerful effects for landfall triggers, and also pumping up Ashaya as well. I mean, I guess actually she's a minimum 6/6 because she also would be a forest. So, yeah. All right. It's pretty beefy. Arden Electromancer. When it enters the battlefield, add red for each creature in your party. It's funny, there was a card back in the day, Priest of Gix, that was actually banned out of like Legacy, I think, at least Modern, or whatever Extended was at the time. Or, I'm sorry, they actually errated it. That's what it was. They didn't ban it. They actually straight up errated the card to say only if you played it from your hand, because they were so worried about being able to bring them back from the graveyard with a card like Unearth and then get the mana out of it, which is just jumping through hoops. I mean, there's better ways to get... I mean, you could just cast Dark Ritual, for example. The body's probably not that much more important. And here, this card will probably let you dump your hand pretty nicely. It counts as a wizard, so at the worst case scenario, you're paying 3 and getting a red back. And best case scenario, you could really dump your hand pretty quickly. It reminds me a little bit of the Gruul beater that sees play in Pauper so much. It's a red-green hybrid 2/2, and you add a green and a red. Let me know in the comments. We're going to move past it. But it has a little bit of that feel of committing to the board and getting mana and continuing to kind of build your board rapidly. Seafloor Stalker, a 3-mana 2/3. You can pay 5 to give it +1/+0 until end of turn, and can't be blocked, and this ability costs 1 less to activate for each creature in your party. So later on in the game, if you've got all 4, then it can be Fire Breathing for 1 blue. All right, back. Just helped out one of my favorite Magic couples there with an EDH deck. And we've got Core Blade Master, double strike for only 2, so a 2-power creature for 2. That is certainly within the line of playable, but we also get an upside where equipped warriors you control have double strike. This, of course, will depend on the quality of equipment and the creature types, so warriors getting double strike will definitely complicate things, and we'll have to see what type of equipment they're going to have in here. I'm doubtful we'll see something quite as efficient as Bone Splitter, but who knows? The spoiler season is early here. Oh. There we go. Kite Cleric, another 1-mana party member. This one has flying, and if it was kicked for an additional 2 and a white, when it enters the battlefield, tap up to 2 target creatures, makes this a pretty powerful breakthrough effect. It's a little tough. I mean, 1/1 flyers, I'm generally not hyped about in limited. Historically, I just feel like chipping away for 1 damage at a time like that, not usually worthwhile. It just contrasts in my mind very strongly with like a pinger, traditionally like a Tim card that you can just turn sideways to do a point of damage to a creature or a player is just, I mean, not necessarily a fair comparison. They're different cards, but doing a point of damage at a time with the upside of also killing creatures, phenomenal. Only being able to just chip in there for 1 damage at a time. And again, only if they don't have a flyer, because literally any flyer is going to stop this guy. So overall, not super excited about this card. Probably wouldn't be totally embarrassed to play it. But, you know, not the best for limited. And we'll go over all of that much more as the set unfolds. Anti-Cognition, 2-mana instant. We're going to counter a creature or planeswalker unless its controller pays 2. And if the opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard, counter it and then scry. I mean, that is a powerful effect if your opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard, negating the 2 mana and also allowing you to scry too. So when this works, it's one of the best counter spells ever printed. And when it doesn't, I mean, it's fine. If it's an early game, you're probably going to counter their card. This one's really interesting. Only being creatures or planeswalkers does limit it quite a bit. So there's going to be plenty of times where it's going to be those instants and sorceries or even artifacts or enchantments that take you down. But this card, I think, will be a consideration for multiple formats. And the longer the game goes, the more likely it is. It's also worth noting that it's any opponent. So even if the person that you're countering in a multiplayer game doesn't have 8 or more, it's still going to get the job done as long as someone does. And that brings us to Nissa of the Shadowed Boughs. This is the Golgari Nissa that people were talking about. This was spoiled pretty early on that we were going to be getting a planeswalker with the landfall ability on it. 4 mana, 4 loyalty. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, she gets a loyalty counter. So fetch lands and the like can pump her up pretty quickly. And you can +1 to untap a land you control. You may have it become a 3/3 elemental creature with haste and menace until end of turn. It is still a land, so not going to be able to defend herself in the traditional sense. Planeswalkers that can put out tokens or can remove opposing creatures really have kind of set themselves above all the other planeswalkers. This one has a -5 where you can put a creature card with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of lands you control onto the battlefield from your hand or graveyard with 2 +1/+1 counters. So I think this will see a bunch of play in Commander. I think that's a fun effect. I think as a late game card, it can be really powerful. And potentially late game, you can play this and then ramp her right up immediately with a fetch land to be able to put in a 6-drop or more, depending on if you have cards like Harrow or anything like that. So I think Commander players will have a lot of fun with this. I don't have much of an opinion about Standard play at all. I think we're going to have to wait and see how this spoiler season goes before we have any firm opinions about Standard. as a single printing can completely invalidate an archetype potentially. But that's it for now. We'll touch base later on in the day here with the remainder of today's spoilers. But I knew today was going to be a busy one with customers and, of course, our Wednesday Night Legacy at 7. So I wanted to get something out for you guys so you can keep up with these spoilers. We'll get the rest for you later on. And let me know if there's anything else you want out of these videos, if there's certain formats you want considerations for, or how I can improve them. Thanks for watching. That is all for this one, but don't worry, there is a lot more. You can check out our older videos, and we're always putting out new videos from ELD's Time Vault Games in Bellingham, Massachusetts. If you want to help the channel, of course, you can like, subscribe, share, tap that notification bell so you can know the next time our new videos come out. Thanks for watching.